Hey everyone, this is a video showing you how I make drum and bass drums with phase plant. Yeah, so I'm going to show you this loop that I've made here. I've drawn out this MIDI pattern here at the top and then I've just bounced it down with some processing. So I'll play this for you and then I'll show you how I made the kick, the snare and the different sort of top elements. Yeah, so this is the loop. Yeah, so kind of tight drums, probably sort of, yeah, like minimal sort of drum and bass drums, I guess. Right, so yeah, as you can see here, this is the drum pattern. I've just got 5 different instances of phase plant. So we'll start firstly with the kick. So you can see here, so this is phase plant if you've not seen it before. So you've got your generators here, effects here, modulators here. So I've got 4 different groups here, which are the sort of different parts that I've got of the kick. So we've got the fundamental here first. So the fundamental is just sort of the main sort of tone of where the kick is. So if I were to get span up, and then this is just a kick sample from, these are just kicks from one of my sample packs. So this sort of region, you see they've all got a lot of energy in this sort of region. So this is sort of where your fundamental is going to be, sit in the sort of frequency range, and then you've usually got a bit of body up here, which is yeah, just comes from, well, you can get that from a lot of different regions. Sometimes you can layer in sort of live samples to sort of fill this region out. And then you've usually got a noise layer, which would be sort of where the beater is hitting the kick drum, where it's hitting the skin. So I've got different parts here. So we've got the fundamental here. So this is the kick. So you can see we've got the fundamental here. So I'll just mute all the bits. We've got a fundamental, which is the main sort of punch of where the sort of snare is. We've got a sub layer which is just layered over to give it a bit more low end. We've got a noise layer which, as I said before, is sort of representing the beater hitting the drum skin, and then I've got a hat sample as well, which is often nice to layer over. So I'll just show you how I've done all these bits. So the fundamental, first of all, so the main way that you're going to sort of make kicks and also sort of the sort of transients for snares is with sine waves using a pitch envelope. So we can see it here. So the way that there's 2 different ways you can sort of tune your kicks. You can either put it on the 0 harmonic and then use the shift, which is basically the frequency, to sort of tune where you sort of want it to sit. So we've got these 2 LFOs here, which are actually envelopes. I've just sort of turned them off so that they're not looping, they're just playing once. And I've just gone in and drawn the shape manually. So this first one here on the left is affecting the pitch. So again, because I've pitched it this way, the other way you can pitch it, sorry I didn't say before, is if you put this on harmonic 1 and then you just play whichever note. If it's on harmonic 0, this is whatever note I play on the MIDI keyboard, it's always going to play this. Whereas, yeah, if you put it up here, you can play different notes. So you can pitch it to sort of whatever, you can tune it to sort of whatever key you want. But for this way, I've just done it this way. So we've got this pitch envelope here, which is on the shift, so that's changing the frequency. So, I mean, the more you push it, let me turn all these other things off. You can hear that sort of, yeah, the transients starting at a sort of higher pitch. The more you push this, the more it sort of starts to sound like a sort of, like you get a zapping sort of sound. So I usually don't have this too much, especially not for your sort of kick fundamental. And this LFO envelope here, which I've drawn the same shape, just a bit, yeah, it decays a bit slower. So you can see this one's decaying at about, yeah, around 160, 170 milliseconds. And this one's at about 10. I mean, yeah, these aren't exact values, obviously, because that value will change with the sort of adjusting this frequency. But that's sort of, yeah, basically this one's a bit slower, and this is on the actual gain. So this is giving the sort of shape of the fundamental, and this is the sort of shape of the pitch envelope. And so when you've got these two sort of set up, you can just play around with these frequencies, these speeds, just to sort of shape the kick how you want it. So if I mess about with this one, this is sort of the decay of like the whole fundamental, so I can make this a lot slower. I'll make it a lot faster to tighten it up a bit. And then, yeah, with this pitch envelope as well, you can slow it down to make the... I tend to keep that quite fast for the kick. So next, we'll do the noise layer next, because that's the sort of order that I did it in. So the noise layer, yes, we've just got a noise generator here, in white noise. We can change this slope to sort of... So this is... all the way left is white noise, and then it's sort of changing it between white noise all the way to the left. You've got brown noise in the middle. You've got pink noise. You just move it sort of between left and right, depending on how bright you want it. I've just got it all the way over to the left. So you can see here I've got a bit of distortion, just adding a bit more colour to the white noise. Generally, when I use a white noise sort of layer in drums, I'm trying to sort of do stuff to it to sort of make sure it doesn't sound just like white noise. So a bit of distortion is just going to make it sound a little bit different. I've got a filter here, which is using this same just envelope of that's controlling the sort of volume decay on the fundamental. It's just moving the cut off a little bit, just to give it a bit of movement, make it feel a bit more natural. I'll just mute that. Yeah, you can see as it's sort of going along, it's sort of letting a bit more of the sound and cutting it back. It just makes it sound a bit more natural. So yeah, with these two sort of together, that's when you've basically got your sort of kick. But then you can add sort of a bit more sub in. I've added another sub bit because I thought that it needed a bit more sort of low end a kick. So yeah, it's just a sine wave. I'm going to just tune it back up again to the same as this. And then, so I've got another envelope here, which is controlling the gain. Sorry, so this one before is controlling the gain for the noise. So you can see here I've just given it a little bit of attack, that's just to sort of let room for the fundamental in, just to make sure that it's not sort of interfering too much with it. And then obviously you've got your decay here, so you can tune it, but you want this quite fast normally. So yeah, so that's the noise. Then so for this sub layer, I've drawn in this envelope shape. You can just have a normal decay like that, but often I find if you just add a little bit of a sort of boost back in, because if you look at the sort of shape of a kick drum, I mean, these are all sort of like quite clipped kick drums, but usually there's a bit of a sort of, because the beater that hits a kick drum is usually like a lot fatter and rounder than a drumstick that's hitting a snare, so the transient's a bit different. I mean, if you hit a table with just, you can do it with your hand, just your fingertip hit the table and then hit it with like the sort of the bridge of your palm, you'll obviously hear like it's a lot of a different sound. So yeah, it's usually a more rounder sort of sound when it's hit with something with a more surface area, which is what the kick drum gets hit with. So I usually just draw this shape so I don't have like this attack right at the start like that, because that's not really the sort of sound I want with the kick drum. You want it to sort of have a bit of sort of attack to it, and then yeah, you can just give this. So this is sort of making room for the transient. You've got your noise here, and then it's just adding a little bit of low end to the end of that. After that, basically, just to fill it out a bit more. So if I take this off, and I mean, yeah, you can probably want to increase the speed of that a bit here in it, but this is just making it a bit more powerful, I think, in the low end, which is you want a bit of low end energy in your kick, because that's sort of where sort of going to hit. And then I've got just a hat sample here, just a random hat sample I found from a sample pack that I'm working on. Actually, it's one of the hats that I've made. So yeah, if I mute all these. Yeah, so I mean, it's often nice to just to layer a hat sample over your kick. I've not done any sort of envelope for this because it's just a sample, so it's already got the volume decay sort of in it. Just doing a bit of filtering out the high end. And then yeah, so all this, I'll talk about this processing that I've done here. So I'll turn all this off actually first, so you can hear how it's sort of affecting the kick. So first of all, we've got some distortion. And it's been controlled with an envelope, the drive and the mix, the same sort of volume envelope. It's just giving it a bit of punch rather than just having it all the way up. Next, I've got a disperser, so you can sort of hear the difference that the disperser makes straight away. But it's just adding a bit more low end punch as well, so you can tune it sort of with this way. You can hear if I boost it, that's sort of what it's doing. It's sort of giving it another sort of if you just do it a really small amount. Again, you don't want to pinch too much. Just adds a little bit more punch to the drum. Then I've got an EQ. It's just boosting this is the sort of fundamental region bit. I usually do a sort of cut around 200-300 hertz when I'm making a kick, usually because that region tends to make it sound quite boxy. So I usually just do a bit of a boost then, and then yeah, a little boost to the high end. This just a little boost here. Oops. Yeah, then I've got a limiter, just catching like some of the peaks at the top. Bit of multi-band compression. So yeah, just doing a little bit of more compression sort of here on the low end and the high end. There's not too much. This isn't actually doing it. Move it down. It's because I've played around with the different sort of settings on it. So yeah, this is it's just doing a really small amount on each part with pretty slow attack and release. And then just a limiter at the end, again, just to catch anything that's going over 0. So that's the kick. I'll do the snare next. The snare's got a bit more going on to it. So we can see here, we've got the different parts that I've got of the snare. So again, we've got first the transient. I'll just mute all these. So we've got the transient. We've got a noise layer. Another noise layer. And then a couple of acoustic sort of samples. So we've got an acoustic sort of drum. And then a clap. So we'll do the transient first. So again, the transient I've done in the same way as I've sort of done the fundamental of the kick. Just a sine wave, and I've just kept it on the first time on it this time, just to so I can just sort of pitch it easily. So again, we've got an envelope here which is on the pitch, so it's just going up by an octave. But you can sort of just right click and put 12, like as in for 12 semitones. So that's just going by an octave. You can do more if you want. And then this one here, this is the sort of shape, sorry, of the pitch envelope. So it's a similar sort of shape, just really fast sort of decay, and then it smooths out a little at the end. Similar sort of shape for this. This is for the gain of the transients, is the volume envelope. So again, you can sort of pitch these. Usually want them quite a lot faster for a snare. So this is going through to lane 1. So in the previous kick, these were all going one after the other. I've done it a bit differently here. You can see we've got lane 1, 2 and 3. Lane 1 and 2 are both going into lane 3. So anything that goes into lane 1 is just skipping lane 2 and going into lane 3. And anything that goes into lane 2 is just going straight into lane 3. So they're like parallel processing. And it will become a little bit more clearer why I've done that in a second. So this is going just to lane 1, as you can see. Just some transient shaping, just boosting the attack, taking down the sustain, a bit of pump, some distortion, which is just giving it a little bit more sort of colour, I guess. And then this is, I think, yeah, doing some hard clipping. So it's just a distortion doing hard clipping at the end. Close these down. Then next we've got the noise layer. Yeah, so it's just noise, white noise, with some low end filtered out. And I've taken a little bit down. You can see here it's just a little bit of a... And I usually do like a little bit of a takedown, just try and sort of find around where the sort of fundamentals hitting. So you're gonna have like the transient's often going to be sort of like 200 to 500, but you will get some sort of fundamental bit of the transient up in this sort of 1 to 2k region as well. So I usually do a just sort of dip there for the noise, just to take that down. And so what I've done is I've used this envelope that's controlling the pitch. I've used it to duck the gain on this. So I've drawn an envelope here for the shape, just to with a bit of a tack, just to make room for the transient to come through. And then just as a bit of safety, also what you can do is use this same envelope, either the volume one or the pitch one, on the gain here, just negatively. So it's just going to take it down exactly in time with the transient. So I've done that on the sort of gain here, and you can see I've got two envelopes here. So one's going through to lane 1 and one's going through to lane 2. So this sound's getting parallel processed. So this is the sort of like main sort of noise layer, lane 2. So I've got some distortion. Again, I'll turn all these off so you can sort of hear how they're affecting it. So we've got some distortion. So this resonator, you can hear straight away, it's just adding a little sort of little resonant sound. So I think that's usually pretty cool for snares. You can control the intensity, the decay. It just makes it sound a little bit more natural, I think. So I do this often with the noise layer as well. Just add a little bit of resonator on there, just to give it a bit more of a sort of realistic feel. And in the same sort of vein, I do these sort of notch filters to sort of just add sort of weird phase things to the sound. So it's just, again, I'm just trying to make it sound not like white noise. Not just like white noise. I've got a couple of those at different frequencies. Oh no, I've just got one. This is doing a bit of just taking out the low end. I've got a stereo, which isn't doing anything. It'd probably be better if I moved it sort of there. So I've got some reverb, which is being controlled by this same envelope. So the mix is just moving it up like that. I can just leave it, but you obviously get a massive tail, so it's just a bit better, I think, if you use an envelope to make it go back to 0, so you can just get a bit of reverb, and then you can use the speed of this to change how sort of much sort of decay you want in the sort of noise. Usually quite fast though. I've got a convolution reverb as well. These are really cool. They just use instant impulse responses, so it's just sort of real spaces, or just like, yeah, you can have artificial spaces. It's just trying to, yeah, emulate sort of actual places rather than just like an algorithm making the reverb. So I've just got it here, pretty low mix. Again, just using this envelope to control the mix. Yeah, you can use this fade out to, you can shape it so I can have it. I usually like to bring it a bit, use this sort of decay here to shape it. Give it some fade out, because if you don't fade it out, it sounds a bit unnatural, sorry. You give it a nice thing like that. And you can fade it in as well. I usually fade it in a bit so it's not, yeah, so there's no sort of peak bit at the start that's going to affect the transient. You can use this tone to, yeah, change the sort of tone, how much you want. And then, yeah, so this stereo would be good here then, because we've got some stereo information that's been introduced by these two reverbs. This is just boosting a bit more width, and then another filter at the end. So yeah, this noise layer has been put through this and the original, this sort of lane 1 as well. So if I turn sort of this one off, yeah, you can see it's this distortion is sort of gels it together. So when you sort of got your noise layer, you want to run it through some distortion. It really sort of gels the snare and makes it a bit more cohesive. So I've got this other, I'll just mute these for now, this other noise layer, which I've made by just using, so this is just a saw wave, and I'm using a noise, and because this is outside of the envelope, this isn't coming out through any of the outputs, so this is just like an auxiliary generator, and I'm using it to modulate the shift. So this is basically frequency modulation, so you can taking off some low end. Again, I'm using this sort of envelope shape, and then using to get the sort of volume of it, and then using this other pitch envelope just to duck it. So you see it's a minus 82.5%, so it's just going to duck it in time with this, just to make sure that there's nothing happening that's going to catch it. And again, this is going to lane 2, so it's going through all this processing that I've just went over there. So yeah, it sounds a bit weird on its own, but I mean, if you listen to it in context with everything else, it's definitely adding to it. So I think a lot of the time when making snares, it's just about making these weird little sort of noises that you can layer with it, but just making sure that you're using sort of these envelopes to make sure that it's not going to interfere with the sort of main transient. Then we've got an acoustic layer. So this is just a random acoustic drum sample that I've found. Sort of loaded in a sampler. Pitched it sort of where I wanted it. And then I've got these two envelopes. So again, it's going through to lane 1 and lane 2. So it's going through to both of these and being parallel processed. Giving it a bit of attack. Again, just use these envelopes to make sure that the pitch is the gain's dipping, so it's not interfering with the transient. This one again is just a little bit on the cut off. So it's just adding like these little layers. It's gonna gel with everything else. So if I turn everything else back on. I've done the same thing. This clap sample. Then through to lane 1 and 2. Being ducked with these envelopes. Bit of filtering. And so we got all of these going through to lane 3. So I'll just show you all the processing on here. So again, I'll turn all this off so you can sort of hear how it sounds. So again, we've got a disperser. It's just adding a bit more punch to the transient, I find, adding a disperser. Yeah, so then a distortion, just doing a bit of extra sort of crunch and gain. I've got a multipass doing, so I'm only doing sort of stuff on these two bands because there's not really going to be much low end in the snare. So on this sort of mid band, just a bit of transient shaping, just to sort of boost the transient a little bit of compression, slow attack and release, and then a bit of compression on just the high end again, slow attack and release. I'll sort of turn this off. Yeah, it's just going to give it a bit more punch. Some EQing. So you can see the sort of shape here that I've done. Boost sort of there where the sort of transient fundamental is. Bit of a dip, a tiny dip around sort of this 1K region, and yeah, like a high end boost. We do take it down a little touch. Yeah, so you just sort of do that to taste. Then we've got some more distortion, which is doing the hard clipping. And then a limiter at the end, which is probably not really even really doing much, probably just sort of there for safety. Make sure nothing goes over 0. So that's the snare. Next, so we've got a hi-hat loop that I've made. So it's just some white noise. Again, you can just the slope to sort of how bright you want it. A bit of distortion and some filtering, just high pass taking out all the low end. So this LFO here is on the gain, so this is controlling the sort of volume of this. So as you can see here, I've drawn in this shape. So I've got the grid set to 32. So this is a 2-bar loop basically. So each one of these represents 16ths, I think. So you can see I've just done each sort of hat has this sort of shape. If you just sort of hold Control, I think it is, you can sort of move these and snap them to the grid. So that's really helpful for when you're doing these sort of hi-hat loops. You can just sort of snap it and make sure so you know that these are all sort of in time with the beat. And then we've got sort of a really fast sort of decay going down to about 25%, and then it sort of smooths out to give the sort of tail. So you've got the sort of sharp decay here, which is the sort of drumstick hitting the hi-hat, and then this tail, which is the sort of sizzle at the end. But we've got it quite, I mean, you can sort of play about with this to sort of how and then so you can just draw in like these little patterns. So I've got this little sort of shuffle here. They're all just sort of hitting 0. I mean, if you wanted them to be different, you could sort of make all these start at a different point just to change the sort of velocity. But what I've done is I've just used this random generator, just 1% on this gain. So it is just going to change the volume really slightly to give it a bit more of a human feel. I've also used this LFO, so this is set to 8:4, which is the same as 2:1. So this entire rotation of this LFO is 2 bars. This is 4:8, so it's 1:2 basically. You just can't really go down to, I don't think this only lets you take it down to 4. You can't go any lower, so you've just got to use those sort of ratios if you want to do anything different. This is 1:2, and this is just on the pan. I've got it to plus minus, so it's going between left and right. It's going between -1 and 1, the value. If you just leave it on plus, it's only ever going to go from 0, which would be sort of centered, to either right or left. So you've got to put it on plus and minus if you want to go from left to right. But so it's on the pan. So if I increase this, you can just sort of see what it's doing a bit more prominent. Just giving it a bit of stereo information. So that's the sort of basis of the hat. So if I take all this processing off, so again, as I said before, I use a resonator. I've got it set up just a lot higher, and if I turn this up, you can sort of hear that sort of squeaky sound. Sounds a bit rubbish, but if you sort of blend it in, I think it adds a little bit more of a sort of, I think it just makes them sound a bit more natural, personally. You can just and again, as I said before, when I'm using white noise, it's good to put sort of notch filters in, just to, I've got a couple there. So it just adds a bit of sort of phase distortion, I guess, or not actual phase distortion, but it just sort of like, adds a bit of phase in and just makes them sound a bit less like it's just white noise, as I said before. And then I've got convolution reverb. Again, just like with fade in and fade out, just being affected by this envelope, this LFO here. This is just affecting the mix in time with the actual hi-hats, and then just a bit of reverb, which again, so this is just sort of giving it, rather than just having it at just a value just like that. So you've just got a constant reverb tail in the background. This just makes it a bit more clean. Then some distortion with the Facturator, adding a bit of colour to it. A little bit of compression with this dynamics, so you just sort of use this to sort of set the threshold, and use this to set the ratio. This sort of line here, so you can have it like that, which is like 30:1, basically limiting. Bit of like 1.2, just tightening stuff up a little bit, and then just a bit of EQ that's just doing a little boost to that sort of 4K region. Yeah, then the next hat is again just white noise, same sort of shape, same sort of envelope. It's just one envelope controlling it because I've just got this one hit, and I've used this convolver. So if you just look through all these convolution reverbs, there's loads of different things that you can use, and there's loads of drum ones. So I've just got a tambourine hit here, so you can hear it. I'm just mixing it in by using this mix. So I take it off. So it's just adding a bit more of an interesting tail on the end. And then again, you can use this tone to control the sound a bit more. And then just use another resonator. Just to give it, again, just a bit more of a sort of a resonant frequency in it, just to make it sound a bit more interesting and not just, again, like just a white noise generated hi-hat. That's the main thing I sort of try and do when I'm making sort of hats in Phase Plant, is just try and make it not sound like white noise by using weird little FM sounds or resonators or convolution reverb or just different things like that. So I've done the same with this other hat again. Just use some reverb, distortion, compression, and then I've just got this ride impulse response, and then you can use a stretch as well to sort of pitch that. Use this to sort of use this decay to sort of decide how much a tail you want it to have, and then a bit of EQ just to take the low end out. So yeah, those are all the drum hits. So yeah, putting them all together into a loop and with a bit of processing. Yeah, so I hope this video has been good for you getting some tips in designing drums in Phase Plant. If you want to see how I've processed all these drums, sort of post-processing that I've done to get them to sound in this sort of cohesive drum loop, then make sure you subscribe to my Patreon, where I've also got loads of other videos about drum processing, drum sound design, bass sound design, where I break down my tracks and where I upload loads of samples that I've made so you can get some of the drum sounds that I've made myself. Yeah, big ups everyone, and thanks for watching.